On the morning of the 7th of September 1978, a man waiting at a bus stop near Waterloo Bridge in London felt a sharp pain in the back of his leg. Looking behind him, he saw another man picking up an umbrella off the ground. That man apologized, then hurried across the road, jumping into a taxi. Just 4 days later, the man who had been jabbed in the leg was dead. Georgi Markov was a Bulgarian dissident writer who had defected to the West in the early 1970s, arriving in London earlier in 1978. Markov was born in Sofia in 1929 and had initially studied as a chemical engineer, before a bout with tuberculosis at age 19 saw him hospitalized for periods of time. It was then that he began writing. His first novel was published in 1957, followed by another in 1959, and a collection of short stories in 1961. He was accepted into the Union of Bulgarian Writers, an approved communist state organization which opened up opportunities for him. He did, however, fall foul of state censors, mainly for his plays, which used allegories to criticize the dictatorship of Bulgaria, led by Todor Zhivkov. Despite this, he was among the writers and artists that Zhivkov co-opted into the regime. Whilst Markov paid lip service to the state committees for writers, he was privately dismissive of the communist system. In 1969, he obtained a permit to travel to Bologna, Italy, to stay with his brother. Due to return in September 1971, he applied for an extension to stay in the West, but was refused. He stayed on anyway, travelling to London to learn English. During the remainder of his life, he worked for the BBC, Deutsche Welle, and Radio Free Europe. Meanwhile in Bulgaria, the regime sentenced him in absentia to 6 years and 6 months for his defection. Markov further angered the regime with the increasingly strident content of his broadcasts. Initially poking fun at the Bulgarian dictatorship using satire and sarcasm, he became more vitriolic and, crucially, addressed the corruption and hypocrisy of Zhivkov's inner circle. This set in train plans to eliminate Markov. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider liking, subscribing to the channel, and sharing. And please consider supporting my work with a PayPal donation. The link is in the description. Thank you. Following the incident at the bus stop, Markov continued on to work at the BBC World Service. Still in pain, he noticed that a small red pimple had formed at the site of the stabbing. That evening, he developed a fever and was admitted to St. James's Hospital. He made statements to doctors treating him that he was convinced he had been poisoned before he died on the 11th of September. Given his statements and his personal circumstances, the authorities treated the case with the utmost seriousness. The Metropolitan Police ordered a thorough autopsy of his body, performed by Dr. Rufus Crompton. Noting a red mark on Markov's leg, he cut tissue from the affected area. The sample was sent to Porton Down, the UK government's secret chemical and biological weapons research establishment, for further analysis. When Dr. David Gall, Porton Down's research medical officer, examined the sample, he found a tiny pellet, measuring just 1.7 millimeters in diameter, made principally from platinum, with a small percentage of iridium. 2 minute holes, with a diameter of 0.35 millimeters, had been drilled through the pellet to produce a small cavity. Scientists at Porton Down were satisfied that it was a poison pellet, though no traces of poison remained in it. After considering Markov's symptoms and death, their conclusion was that the toxin in question may well have been ricin, a deadly substance produced in the seeds of castor oil plants. The scientists further speculated that a sugary substance would have been used to coat the tiny hole and keep the poison inside the pellet until it could be delivered inside the body. From there, the substance would have been absorbed, releasing the poison into the victim's system. Had it been ricin, Markov would have been doomed. At that time, no antidote to ricin existed. There was widespread skepticism of these conclusions. They were thought of as too fantastic and too elaborate, since spy organizations were perfectly capable of eliminating opponents in more prosaic ways. Yet 10 days before Markov's murder, there had been a remarkably similar attempt on the life of another Bulgarian defector, Vladimir Kostov, in a Paris metro station. KGB defector Oleg Kalugin claimed that the KGB had assisted the Bulgarian regime in arranging the assassination, and that Markov had indeed been killed using an umbrella gun. In June 2005, the Times even named a suspect. Francesco Gullino, a Dane of Italian origin, was alleged to be Markov's assassin. He was described as a smuggler with links to Bulgarian intelligence. It should be noted that there isn't any hard evidence to link him to the crime. In June 2008, it was reported that Scotland Yard had briefly revived their interest in the case. Attempts were made to interview relevant individuals in Bulgaria. It seems, however, that any investigation has hit a permanent brick wall. A potential trail of documents that would lead to a resolution are assumed to have been destroyed by the Bulgarian communists as the Iron Curtain collapsed across Europe. Markov was buried in a small graveyard at the Church of St. Candida and Holy Cross in Whitchurch, Dorset. The peaceful setting belies the remarkable life and extraordinary death of Georgi Markov. More than 40 years later, his assassination remains one of the most incredible stories of the Cold War.